Good morning. It's Wednesday, June 7th, 2017 from the Total Soccer Show, Dirty Tackle, and Howler Magazine. This is the Goalmouth. I'm George Qureshi. I've experienced a series of very frustrating technical difficulties this morning. So, no music, no swanky microphone. You're going to get me on my cell phone reading you, performing for you today's soccer news. So here we go. You've probably seen the reporting on the U.S. national team strategy in preparing for Sunday's World Cup qualifier at Azteca Stadium in Mexico City. It's a famously difficult place to play, in large part because it's 7,200 feet above sea level. So the U.S. players reported for training camp much earlier than usual and much earlier than FIFA requires clubs to release them. They trained in Denver, elevation 5,200 feet, then had a friendly on Saturday against Venezuela in Salt Lake City, elevation 4,500 feet. They returned to Denver and are continuing to prep for tomorrow's qualifier against Trinidad and Tobago. So here's the thing. Last week, some MLS fans were upset that their teams were playing games without their best U.S. internationals, particularly the Seattle Sounders, which is missing its two best strikers, Clint Dempsey and Jordan Morris. They were even more upset when Bruce Arena allowed center back Matt Besler to travel back to Kansas City for his match on Saturday. It turns out that Sporting KC is missing 4 of its potential center backs, so Peter Vermees made that request and it was granted. You know what other team has a bunch of players in MLS? Trinidad. And it turns out they also wanted their players released early, but that request was denied. My friend in Trinidad, Lissana Liberd, has some excellent reporting on this. He writes that TTFA President David John Williams personally asked Sunil Gulati and Don Garber for reciprocity for Trinidad's own MLS players, and he was told, quote, "The MLS and USSF entered into an agreement before the beginning of the MLS season in January 2017 to release their players early for the June qualifiers." Now, there's nothing the TTFA can do about this. FIFA requires players to be released 3 days before an official match if it's taking place within its own continent, 4 days if it's intercontinental. And MLS and the USSF are free to make whatever kinds of agreements they want. It's even economically rational for MLS to put the interests of the US team ahead of its own if they believe that doing so will help our country qualify for the World Cup. You can make the case. But it's nice to have confirmation that this is what's going on, because fans of MLS teams deserve at least to know why the matches to which they've bought tickets were qualitatively worse than they would have been if this secret agreement had not been made public. Moving on, Miami Beckham United has secured the final 3 acres it needs in Miami's Overtown neighborhood to build its proposed MLS stadium. The group still doesn't have an official expansion franchise, and the land will need to be rezoned for stadium use. It also doesn't have plans for parking, which is kind of crazy. Take it from me. Public transportation in Florida is pretty terrible across the board. Finally, there was that whole January 31st deadline for expansion bids, and 12 other cities actually, submitted one. But my money is on Beckham skipping the line and getting his club. After all, he's working with Tim Leiweke, who engineered Beckham's move to the LA Galaxy a decade ago. In other words, these guys know how to get MLS to bend its own rules, which isn't that hard anyway. Just ask anyone in Trinidad. Okay, now a few news items that caught my attention in the last few days, but have so far gone unreported in the Goalmouth. 2 England hooligans have been banned from attending England away matches for life by the England Supporters Travel Club for gestures they made during the German national anthem at the England-Germany friendly that took place in Dortmund in March. One made the Nazi salute, and the other made what is described in the story as an Adolf Hitler mustache and cutthroat gestures toward the German fans. There are reports that North Korean workers have been subjected to forced labor in the construction of Zenit St. Petersburg's new stadium, which is being built for use at the Russian World Cup next year. The Norwegian magazine Josimar broke the story, and The Guardian has developed it. These workers reportedly work 7 days a week for between $10 and $15 a day, of which the North Korean government keeps a big chunk. And they're kept in extremely cramped living conditions. A 47-year-old North Korean man died of a heart attack recently. One anonymous subcontractor said, quote, "These guys are afraid to speak to people. They don't look at anyone. They're like prisoners of war." Josimar's reporting from February prompted 4 Nordic FAs to ask FIFA for an explanation, and FIFA President Gianni Infantino responded in a letter that was leaked to The Guardian, in which he wrote, quote, FIFA is aware of and firmly condemns the often appalling labor conditions under which North Korean workers are employed in various countries around the world. As a consequence of the relatively high number of incompliances compared with the other FIFA World Cup stadiums found in St. Petersburg, and due to the fatal accidents that happened on that construction site, FIFA and the local organizing committee have required the general contractor to take immediate steps to rectify the issues identified. That's all from Infantino's letter. An inspection in March found no North Korean workers on that particular site. In what I believe is a separate FIFA statement, FIFA said that the steps it has taken to monitor the abuses are, quote, part of a broader effort by FIFA to systematize and enhance its activities to ensure respect for human rights throughout its operations. Okay, FIFA, take the World Cup away from Russia, which is a dictatorship that invades other countries and murders its own civilians. Not to mention, makes the lives miserable of these absolutely helpless North Koreans building that stadium in St. Petersburg. And let's keep in mind that that stadium is really just a TV set, and we'll all be watching the show beaming out of it next year on Fox Sports. I already feel absolutely gross. Okay, let's finish this up quickly. Arda Turan assaulted a journalist on the Turkish team's airplane. He was sent home and subsequently announced his retirement from international soccer. This journalist, not some young blogger who's getting into it, mixing it up with a well-known 30-year-old Turkish international. The reporting does not say how old this reporter was, but it does say he began his career as a sports journalist in 1973. So he's an old guy. You might have heard... Sorry, no offense to anyone who, started their careers in 1973. I'm just saying, if 30-year-old Arda Turan trying to beat this guy up, it's not a fair fight. All right, you get what I'm saying. You might have heard that there was a panic in the crowd at a public square in Turin during a public viewing of the Champions League final. The Guardian has footage, and let me tell you, it is utterly terrifying. I've often found myself thinking about these terrible stadium disasters in which people die in a crush of bodies. It's so difficult to conceptualize, to think about. We don't have terraces anymore. We just... stadiums here in the U.S. just are a different thing. But the footage we're linking to in the email today shows just how dangerous and scary it must be to get stuck inside a crowd where everyone is just trying to escape. It's really, really a crazy thing to watch. Finally, after a pretty soul-crushing edition of The Goalmouth, I apologize. I will finish by mentioning that there is a pretty hilarious video showing two men who snuck onto the field during Real Madrid's trophy celebration on Saturday. They keep popping up with players, behind players, in the crowd, taking selfies. And Sergio Ramos keeps seeing these guys and trying to shove them out of the way, but he's too eager to get pictures of himself with the trophy. So as soon as they blend into the periphery, he just goes back to, taking these photos with the trophy and just forgets about them, which allows them to just remain on the field. Anyway, there's a great video by a Spanish TV station that sort of shows these guys. It sort of, it darkens the outside area and focuses in on them. So it shows how they're moving among this celebratory procession. It's pretty hilarious. They set the whole thing to James Bond music. I highly recommend it. It's in the email. My name is George Qureshi. Taylor Rockwell will be with you tomorrow morning. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. You can sign up. You can click out to all the stories I've mentioned in the podcast. The link to sign up is in the show notes. And I leave you with today's Goalmouth top tip. The only thing better than getting extra time to prepare for a big match at altitude might be the extra motivation you get from knowing your opponent's kind of cheated so they could prepare for the big match at altitude.